Good evening, everyone. So this is a regular weekly, every Friday is basic Buddhist teachings. Usually this talk is given by the Sokuzan, Sokuzan, who is taking a little vacation up north. So he's asked me to give this talk. Basic Buddhist teachings can go a lot of different directions, and he does quite a bit of research on that, and I don't do much. So tonight's talk title is The First Noble Truth. In Buddhism, as some of you know already, Four Noble Truths are life is suffering, the cause is wanting something else, and the goal is cessation or the ending of that situation. And the fourth one is the path, which is train the mind, Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, or discipline, meditation, and a wisdom, or seeing the truth. Sit down and hold still, discipline. Watch what moves in the mind stream, which is samadhi, awareness practice, meditation practice. And the last one is prajna, which is a Sanskrit word for wisdom, or one of them, which means seeing what is fundamentally true, not just what you believe, what you disbelieve, what you like, what you don't like, what seems to make sense, what is logical, reasonable. It goes beyond that. The spiritual path from the point of view of the Buddha's Dharma, the Buddha's teaching, is to see this, what this is yourself, not believe what the Buddha said. That would be very disrespectful to the Buddha himself if he were here 2,500 years in the past, found out a few things about the nature of the mind, the nature of consciousness, and the nature of what it means to be a human being. He shared it with others, and that grew into more people coming and more people coming. Simply put. So Buddhism is not a belief system. There may be beliefs in it, but the fundamental understanding in Buddhism is to realize or understand what this is fundamentally. And what is it? Relatively, it's an illusion. This is unreal. It is incredibly realistic, like a dream. It's said that the dream that you have at night is a sample dream. It's something that shows you that when you awaken, well, that was unreal, a good thing, or I wish that had come true. That was pretty good. It just, I was really beautiful. I inherited $1 million, and great dream. Or some terrible thing was happening, and you were about to be eaten by a dragon. Not so comfortable. Good thing that isn't true. So that's the sample dream. That shows you what a dream is. This is the real dream. This is the dream that, from what my understanding of what the Buddha was talking about, this is the one you have to awaken from. And you can do that right while you're in the middle of it. You can sit right on your seat and realize, you can realize this, that this is unreal. That doesn't mean that you'll stop eating food because it's unreal, or stop going for walks, or combing your hair if you have any. It doesn't mean that you'll act fundamentally any different. You may in some ways, you probably will in some ways. One of the ways you will that will slow down considerably is you will stop worrying about everything, or also stop judging yourself and others based on ideas, opinions, hopes and fears, passion, aggression, ignorance, etc. Life is suffering, and the Buddha did not say, as those of you who have listened to me quite a bit, did not say part-time. And it's also not nihilism. It's just the truth. We have nerve endings. Sometimes the nerve endings are tickled, like comfortable or pleasurable. Other times the same nerve ending is abraded by something sharp or rough or rugged. Suffering. So pain and pleasure, not separate. They're separated, but they're fundamentally not separate. You have to see that. This happens not only in the 5 sense fields, but also in the mind. Whatever occurs in the mind, just receive it. This is what meditation practice is about. Sit down, hold still, observe the movement of the mind so you can find out what is fundamentally true. find out what is fundamentally true. There's nothing to believe here. 2,500 years of something that may show up to some people as belief, but if you study it, if you practice, if you listen to study what the Buddha said, he never made any claims like that. Just in our everyday situation, this happens and that happens, and then we don't like this, and then this happened. We expected this was going to happen, but no, that's not happening. We're not going to get our way there. So that's abrasive or difficult or threatening or disappointing. All kinds of comings and goings that could be called suffering, or the first noble truth of the Buddha's Dharma. A lot of people in the world that may have never even heard about Buddhism will try to do what with that? Fix it, cover it up. That's one way of so-called fixing it. Covering it up with activities, lots and lots of activity, so you don't have to feel bad. Especially activity you really, really like. You have a really great hobby, spend your whole life just building model airplanes or something. It's not wrong. It's just that you just missed your life, and you will be back for more. Does that mean that there is such a thing as reincarnation? I'm not teaching that. But something's going to happen. You've been here many times. Don't believe anything I say. I'm asking you to consider, listen to it, consider it, and then see how it shows up for you.
Well, Bye. Is not seeing your life or missing your life, is that suffering in and of itself, Bye?
That's you. Something shows up in your life and you start to cover through, you actually become trained. Society will train you to do that. Advertisements are training you to cover things up, cover up the symptoms, cover up the feeling, try to feel better. The issue with that is not so much that there's something wrong with covering something up or addressing suffering or pain with some kind of medication that would get your pain to back off. That may be very, very necessary. In some cases, it's the only way to relate to it. But quite often what happens is if you're suffering in some way, that there's something wrong with that, and we have to find some way to fix that. People make a lot of money selling that idea rather than see what the issue is fundamentally. The whole health situation is quite confusing in that area. People disagree about what is to be done in that area, including mental health. More?
So staying with the suffering is not missing your life.
Staying, whatever arises in the mind stream, right now, from the time you hear these words, train your mind, meditate. From the time you hear those words, you can do something else. I'm not here, I won't promise you anything. I can't guarantee anything. And I don't need you to follow me anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. But if you're listening, you could consider it. You could think about it. And how you work with that is kind of up to you. How you do that? Just like Byun tonight is going into a 10-day solitary retreat. You don't mind me sharing that, do you?
It's okay.
Good. Notice how I didn't ask you ahead of time. And why is she doing that? I'm not even going to ask her. Because I don't know the storyline, but life gets very difficult. We want to go deeper into this. And if we've been meditating for a while, which you've been meditating, 8 years, something like that, somewhere in that area, maybe not all the time. I know you took whole weeks off, months. But here you are, you come back to this, and this is something that you're going to look at. And it has even been said way before I got here that one of the ways that you can describe sitting meditation or shikantaza, which is what I teach, sit down, hold still, watch the movement of the mind. Don't add anything to it. Don't necessarily do a mantra or follow your breath or do anything. Just sit down and watch the movement. It sometimes has been called voluntary suffering. So there's this first noble truth of the Buddha: life is suffering, and you can kind of get away from that. You can think about this. You can go make some Jello, and then you can eat the Jello, and then you could watch a movie, and then you could listen to your neighbor's lawnmower, or then you could listen to, maybe one of your friends has a lot of problems or complaints, and you can listen to him or her and have a feeling that you're being helpful to them. You probably are. They probably need somebody to listen to them. But you could also take some time out, sit down, and watch the movement of the mind to make things worse, to confuse things, to clamp down on things, to slide things this way or that way, to try to manipulate the mind stream in a way that you don't have to experience whatever it is in your mind that is painful.
Yudao is
that your real name?
I don't know.
Go ahead, Yudao.
Do we need to see deeply our own suffering
I
in
think we
order
do.
to see our true nature?
I think we need to see it and stop trying to fix it. It's dependently arisen. The causes and conditions for any given situation, even if it's in your body, our health situations are. It's not just this cause that, although sometimes it might boil it down to that. But it's very, very complicated. Being a human being is extremely complicated. But we tend to want control of things. But if any of us, if you're put in charge of your body, if suddenly, instead of your digestive tract and your nerve endings and all of that, which is pretty much on automatic in some way or another, if you're put in charge of any of that, you probably wouldn't live for more than 10 minutes because you'd forget to keep your heart beating, or you'd forget to breathe, or am I being a little bit silly? Somewhat, but you don't want to be too much in charge of something that is extremely complicated and sophisticated, and there's ways to address that, but not by getting right in there at all the controls, the buttons and off and on switches and so on.
Yudao, so if we are feeling pretty good and we want to do something fun, should we sit
Why are you
down?
smiling?
Sit down and look at the wall instead? Should we?
So, well, you know how I say it. I say, but do both. Have a good time. This is not about some kind of a torture, but do both. Enjoy yourself. Do whatever you would like to do, but spend some time taking your 24 hours in a day, take an hour or two out every day, sit down, hold still, and watch what the mind is doing without grasping, without shutting down, and without rejecting or ignoring it. Just watch what the mind, get to know yourself rather than your understanding or your knowledge of yourself comes from others, including me, and including your therapist, including your mother, including the culture. Most of the culture is about controlling people, has been forever, from the Peloponnesian Wars right down to the present war. Control, control, control. No one is really respected, other than, I've mentioned it several times because it was so interesting that Unyo's was studying the Blackfoot, indigenous tribe of Indians who actually their culture, could you say it in a couple of words what it was?
Their main idea was generosity. They couldn't understand why people wouldn't have what they need. And that's the measure of their wealth. It's how generous they were.
So therefore they didn't have big disagreements or arguments or warfare going on?
Well, I don't know that. I'm not an expert on that. But what little I read was that they seemed to find a different way to live together in community without having things that we call poverty, hunger.
No, you wouldn't have anybody in their community who went without anything they needed. Whereas our situation is quite a bit different. Different ways to describe it. Yun.
Yun bowing, why does it look, at least sometimes, why does it look like I can effect or have some kind of control over like the quantity or severity of suffering?
Well, you can have some say so about that. There are things that you can, if you overeat, and don't do that, or if you, any number of things. If you, when you're talking to someone, if you really are hearing what they're saying, you take an interest in that person, then there's less likelihood that you'll argue or disagree with them, even though you don't necessarily agree with what they're saying and what they're doing, but you're putting that person before yourself. You're respecting what is showing up as confusion rather than jumping right in and correcting them. So you're actually receiving that. You're receiving that. Am I going in the right direction? Is there further refinement to your question?
Maybe so. I'm wondering, can we alleviate or have an effect on suffering by looking into the second noble truth and finding ways to maybe not want what we don't have so much?
Maybe. Pretty good idea. What do you guys think?
What is this?
What's what?
Your mind, what is the second noble truth?
What is it?
Wanting something else.
Yeah, wanting something we don't have, wanting something we have too much of to go away, wanting something that we don't have enough of to come closer, and wanting to just not be bothered by things. None of my business. I don't want to. We have different ways of working with it, covering it up with this or that, conclusions, ideas, judgments, evaluations about ourselves or about others. So what's the question?
Well, Bowing, how does sitting meditation, observation meditation affect or approach the second noble truth of wanting something else?
So the fundamental misunderstanding is that that we're a separate being, that there's someone here and there are other people over there. That's an illusion. That is unreal. That who you are fundamentally is not separate from anyone. It's separated. Your body-mind complex is over there, mine is over here, but our fundamental nature is not separate. And when you see that, the warfare just stops. This doesn't mean that if someone comes up and pop you one, that you won't defend yourself. You won't go, oh, we're all one, and let them take you out. You wouldn't do that. You would relate to it just like it was. You might not fight with them, but you might work with it in a more skillful way than that. But you wouldn't necessarily go into thinking how wrong they are and how correct that you are more.
Bowing, when seeing what this is, does wanting something else fall away?
No, and it doesn't need to. It's not so much the wanting something else, it's when it becomes a demand, when suddenly you're not getting what you want, you've been misunderstood, somebody's not being fair with you, and all the propaganda around the ego that shows up, that we're being mistreated, we deserve more than this. Story after story, we tell that story, and then we have another story and another story. Sitting practice of meditation, which is what you were asking about, if you sit down and watch the mind come and go, emotions arise, you're sitting down, sitting in a symmetrical posture, your eyes are open, you're facing a wall or facing the carpeting or whatever, something where nothing is moving, and the mind stream continues to move and move in terms of thoughts, emotions, feelings, memories. Just observe those. By observing those, rather than most of the world is caught, they don't know that there's a difference between their awareness and the emotions, thinking process, the memory, and so on. Those are all stuck together like plywood, laminated. Or actually, by the sitting practice of meditation, you are slowly, over time, releasing the grip, the paranoia, the hope and fear that the self-centered mind has on the thought process, to try to use that and use the awareness to control, to protect against the unknown, to have a belief system that, as long as you believe this, or a political system, you think this is right and this is what should be done. And if it isn't done this way, we're going to war with the other people. It's all over the place. The whole world is crazy in this way. It's pretty much like a landslide. It's You can't just step into the middle of it, though people try to do that. It's very necessary to find the source of all that. Where is the source? Each person. You need to deal with the war that's here. Otherwise, you'll project that misunderstanding out in the world and think the world is the cause of your discomfort. You all have experienced this, those of you who have been meditating for a while. Or not. Maybe you actually think that other people cause your problems. Go ahead. Look at that for 15, 20 years. But the important thing is to look at it. You don't have to fix it. You have to look at it. So sitting still allows you to watch what moves in its fundamental nature, not when there's 15 stories on 15 different paragraphs or iterations of, I like it, I don't like it, it's good, it's bad, that shouldn't be, they shouldn't have done that. Why did they do that to me? That covers everything up, because we have all of this texture in the mind stream that is run by that part of the consciousness that is curled up into a knot, looks like a fist, and it's the ego demand. I have to have this. I have to do that. I have to. We're addicted to what shows up in the mind stream. And so it is about seeing that rather than about, controlling or stopping it. Well,
Yeah. You and Bowling, what does it mean to lead with awareness when there are just continual knots of ego and consciousness?
it's called awareness. Leading with that means that at some point through mind training, there's no guarantee, but through mind training, your awareness starts to leak out in front of the thought process. Most of the world, there's awareness there, but it's just like the only thing that's driving the vehicle is the thinking process, which is operating out of hope and fear and paranoia. And so therefore, all of your so-called decisions are made out of avoiding this or getting more of that or getting less of this or making sure this doesn't crawl into the vehicle with you. Fear. Whereas if awareness is there, it doesn't mean the thinking process is gone. Sometimes, to use that image or that metaphor, I sometimes say the thinking process is there, but it's on call. When it's necessary to analyze, judge, evaluate, you can still do that, but the leading edge of your life needs to be awareness. You need to receive what's happening. This is where you see the colors of things, the shape of things. You hear the tone of things. Instead of just hearing someone's voice, even if they're giving you a hard time, you hear the timbre and the tone of the voice. You watch their body language move from one position to another. You don't analyze that so that you can get some kind of advantage over them, and you just receive it. It will find its own form if need be in terms of any kind of thoughts around that. Further questions? Yes, sir.
If the suffering, arises with an apparent cause, am I already missing something?
Sure. What you're missing is that you're looking at this very strong, solid appearance of that illusion called relative truth. This caused that. But when you're doing that, what you're missing is all of the dependent origination that was behind the thing that caused, and all of the dependent origination that is behind that which arises up as your personalized suffering or difficulty. So you're blocking out everything else. And why do we do that? Because we believe there is a person who is a thinker, that your personhood, my personhood, anyone else's personhood is a solid, real identity or thing. It's even sometimes in psychology, and I don't know if this is all over the place, but some places it's the idea is to get a healthy ego. It's not see that the ego is unreal. No, we need to have self-esteem. No, you don't. I'm not saying you couldn't take that route. I'm not saying there aren't therapists or counselors or psychiatrists that approach it that way. And I'm not saying that is invalid. I'm just saying it's just a partial way to work with it. It's just dealing with the relative aspect of it. It is a mundane path. And is it valuable? Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's necessary. How do we know? It's here. That's what's happening. Not everyone is going to step out of that just because they hear somebody like me talking and just decide to meditate and try to work with their situation through meditation practice. Should they? I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying that's how it looks to me. It looks like you go to the root of the problem, the root of it, which is what? Mistaken identity, believing that this body-mind complex sitting on this ton right here is a real solid being, or that the beings out here that are listening are solid. I'm not saying they're not there. I'm not saying they don't appear to have solidity. They do. We go to sleep, we wake up, I'm still here, I'm still, my eye color is still blue. I still have the same body, seems to be getting a little older, but we're reassured by that day after day after day. That we're somebody, starting out when we're very, very young. You perhaps might remember when you were 3 or 4, just wondering who you were and what this is about and why all this is happening. Who are these people that tell me what to do? It's children are extremely naive because they have not been indoctrinated, so therefore their wisdom mind is completely alive. And what do? We appreciate that, we enjoy it, but we want them to grow up and start acting more mature. Stop hitting your brother. Put your toys away.
Yvonne, so the first noble truth is life is suffering.
Life is suffering.
And you usually add to that, and it's not part-time suffering. So how is it when things seem to be going pretty well, but how is that suffering?
Well, there's the 3 types of suffering. There's the pain of pain, which we all know what a toothache is. It's painful. Pain of pain. Some people have pain that just doesn't go away. It's just painful day after day after day after day. And sometimes maybe we can get used to that or shut down on some aspect of it or something. And then that's the pain of pain. Then there's the pain of alternation, which is the simple description of that is you're getting what you want, you have what you want, things are going well, but then you're in pain already because you know it won't last. You can see that, I have what I want right now. It may come apart. I may lose it. I may have a lot of money, but I don't have enough. I've got to have more money because I've seen how some people just lose their investments. So we're just using that as an example, but it's the pain of alternation because everything is impermanent. Nothing is guaranteed. Pain of alternation also shows up as fear of death. You're alive now, but won't last. We don't know anyone that's lived, and billions of people, no one has lived very long. Might have lived 120 years, maybe or more, but that probably wasn't too comfortable. And then the final description, classical description, is the pain of the composite or the pain of conditioned existence. And this has been said to be seen only by beings who have realized no self. They realize there's no solid self here anymore. So they're no longer protecting an imaginary self. So there's not a lot of energy going out to protect them from dangerous things. So therefore, they're actually receiving everything, which is the practice of meditation. Train yourself to receive this incredible world. That's what I'm recommending that you do as a student of what the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago. My teachers taught, and teachers down through the centuries have taught this very similar, taught it in different ways. Let's see what this is. So pain of the composite will show up vividly to one who has seen through that there's no solid self in this ground. Is form, feeling, perception, concept, thinking process, and consciousness of the 6 sense fields and their objects. See that there's deep suffering everywhere. Go ahead.
When you're bowing, so are you saying that that third type of suffering, the pain of the composite, is just reserved for those who have seen through this imaginary self?
It's not reserved for anyone. There's not a reserving thing going on. It's just that if you're still protecting yourself and covering up that part of your consciousness that you think is a being that is somehow threatened, if you're working with that, then there's not going to be enough open space to just see the suffering that is all over everything. Everything is in a state of dissatisfaction. This is not nihilism. It's sometimes pointed that way to people who have not studied Buddhism or the Buddhist teachings and just read about it and then throw a judgment on it. Well, Buddhism is nihilistic. They're all negative, talking about suffering and everything. There's a lot of really nice things happen in the world, and they're ignoring that. No, they're not. If someone understands the Buddha's Dharma completely, all the way through, you're about as happy as you're going to get. And it's not. The difference between this is different, but yet no different. The happiness and the sadness are no longer two different things. So therefore, you don't miss anything. You don't miss the suffering in the world, and you also don't get swamped by it so that you can't walk across the room. Because you understand that it is covered up by intense confusion. The people that I meet as students, those who will meet with me or whatever, I see their confusion. But I also know that they're going to have to see that themselves. And this is what I encourage everybody to do. Train your mind, see the truth yourself. You may have to be fully ordained as a monk, you may not. Or you can just go on covering it up. I'm not condemning it or anything. I'm not saying, oh, if people don't pay any attention to Sokuzan, then they're all going to suffer. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that either this resonates with you, either we have some kind of a connection, or we don't. I'm not going to promise you anything. It's a spiritual path. If there's any kind of promise on a spiritual path, it is not a spiritual path. It's a mundane path, and somebody wants to control you, wants a cult, possibly.
When you're bowing, what does a trained mind look like?
You can't see it because it's not separate. Everything is the mind. Everything is the mind. It's the mind. Consciousness only. It's both incredibly vivid and right in front of you, and can be covered up by your ideas, your confusions, your beliefs, your opinions. So you never can really see what this is. If you train your mind to see what this is, you won't see anything but this, and you're not separate from it. It's like seeing the back of your hand everywhere. It's like looking into a mirror all the time. You just see this, and it's not the identity of some old man or some beautiful woman. It's just this. It's just identity. Sometimes we call this Buddha nature, awakened truth, awakened nature. And it's not something we believe. Go ahead.
You're bowing, so would someone who trains their mind act differently?
They would not only act differently if they're training their mind, but if they had a deep understanding or a turning about at the basis of consciousness, as it is sometimes referred to as, there would be no more issue around anything that was happening. This does not mean that suffering would be gone, as it says in the Third Noble Truth. What is gone is the grasping at a self, and the grasping or rejecting or warfare with other. That would be gone. That doesn't mean that that other person might not, or that country or that political party or something might not attack you. They might, because they might believe their thoughts and think that you're a threat. More. That's a good area. Keep going. Help me out with that, Ken.
When you're bowing, just looking at, I guess, behavior. If we spend a lot of time looking, facing the wall, observing what arises in our mind stream, then will there be a manifestation out there that would be identifiable by our families and friends?
There's no guarantee of it, but I'd like to hear more of what brought up that question. Is there, like, would your friends notice that you listened more? Would your family notice that you were hung on their every word, possibly? That might be their way of saying it. And they might also take note that you're no longer agreeing nor disagreeing with them about anything, and that you're listening to them, that the positionality that you once had is gone. This doesn't mean that you would be boring. It might be the other way around. You might be extremely entertaining because you're no longer concerned with trying to show up the way other people think you should, no longer aligning yourself with what will people think. I'm always thinking about what my mother said when I was 5 or 6 years old. What are people going to think? She would say that to me. And I remember, put me in an existential crisis right then. I'm only 7. I said, what the hell will they think? God. I was really, I'm already really concerned about being judged and not having the right clothes and my hair combed a certain way. This is in the 1950s. This was horrible. It's horrible to be a complete, total narcissist at 7 or 8 years old and know it, and know there's nothing you can do about it. And you can't feel anything unless somebody works with you in a certain way where you'll feel good or compliments you or likes you. It's horrible. I know a lot of kids go through that, young people, older people. Some adults are completely swamped by other people's opinions about them. Some people cover up their fear with intense positions on what religion or politics, intense belief in something. That's their reference point, and that substantiates, reifies, validates, and fuels and protects the ego so that it continue to function a certain way. Some people are so, because of their karma, their causes and conditions, are so powerful at that they manifest in such a way that other people see, I want to be under that person because they're really, take anything off anybody. That person might not have the courage to do that themselves, but they see somebody else that does. So that's how you get cults. That's how you get dictators. Don't do what anybody says. Get your own authority. If you haven't noticed, those of you who have known me for a while know I might tell you what to do or ask you to do something, but I also trust you to do whatever you need to do for yourself. It may be this, it may not. You had a question? Are you ready to spit it out, or you want to just rub your leg?
Shadow bowing. How does a path into suffering help us be the happiest we're going to be?
Because there's no one there who is happy or sad. There's no personhood there anymore. So therefore, the humor, the happiness is not separate from anything, anywhere. So when I say not, I'm just saying a very conventional way of saying it. It doesn't, even that is a lie. Relative truth, you cannot say anything that is ultimately true. You can only speak relative truths, which of course are half-truths. Philosophers down through the ages have argued about this, other than ones who have trained their minds. They're not philosophers. They may not be Buddhist, but they're enlightened beings or sages. Philosophers actually think there's such a thing as a truth, something that's true. If they're talking about it, and if they can get the other philosopher, get Nietzsche to agree with them, or get what I've been reading lately, Wittgenstein, I'm sure he would have been a difficult person to have a conversation with, even if you spoke German.
Shadow bowing. You say sometimes a couple things. That you're looking at what we're looking for.
I am.
And you also say it's worse than that.
It's worse than that, and don't forget the other one. What's the other one?
I always get hung up on that.
It's better than that. It's worse than that because it's absolute desolation to ego. The ego is going down. You will not get what you want or what you thought this would be. But how that shows up for each person is going to be quite a bit different. Some people will never look at that. They can't. It's just too devastating. So if that's not happening, they're probably not going to get the other one that is better than that, which is you're liberated. And actually nothing happened because there was never anyone who was in prison because the ego, himself, herself, themselves is unreal. It's always been unreal. So you don't have to get rid of your ego. You just see that it's unreal. And it's like you have 1 foot in the earth and 1 foot in the sky. You're not separate from anything anymore. You're not separate from life, blood pumping, running around in circles, going to the doctor, going to the yoga studio, going to feed Hachi. Hachi's a cat that lives down the road. Not a kitty cat, not a cat. They're doing that, and they're coming and going, coming and going, and coming and going. Keeps doing that. It's an incredible illusion. And when liberation comes, you realize you're still doing all this. You realize there's no solid being. There's a human form, and there's consciousness. Everything is consciousness. This is everything. Sometimes traditionally it's called mind only. Mind only doesn't mean that somehow that this chunk of wood is a mind. It means that it's mind only, consciousness only. There's all kinds of ways of talking about it in the Yogacara tradition, which is what we're studying with the help these days with the help of Bill Waldron and Vasubandhu, 2 really good friends of ours. Chisho, don't you have any questions for me? Just sitting there with your head in your hands.
Shivang, I did have a question. Oh, God.
Please.
My computer has decided to freak out. Okay, there it is, behaving.
Help you with that.
Shivang.
Yes,
So,
sir.
in response to Unyo, you said grasping comes to an end, but suffering doesn't.
Yes.
And I don't understand that because isn't that against what the first and the second noble truth is? First noble truth says the grasping skandhas are suffering. And the second one says that it is because of grasping, suffering is because of intense thirst and grasping. Yes. So if the grasping ends, why doesn't the suffering end? Bye.
The grasping may end, but the grasper is the identity is seen to be unreal. So the grasping has its own, just like a landslide. It's in relative truth. It's right here. So it may have some momentum that will continue to go for a while. But the consciousness is no longer concerned with results because it sees that results are a reinforcement of relative truth. So the consciousness is liberated and has no location in space or time, even though there's a body-mind here. Very good question. Thank you. I'm happy to go further if you have further question. Go ahead, please.
Kishabang, then if there is no grasping and if the consciousness is liberated, what does suffering even mean?
Not much. It's just pain. It's still, there's nerve endings. And so there's going to be some discomfort, some pain, and so on. So it's just part of the spiritual path when the consciousness has been downloaded into this very slow moving realm we call the human realm. Very low vibration. So it seems very, very real. More, let's go further if you have it.
Kishwawing, I understand the nerve endings causing pain because that is just biological. It has almost nothing to do with the ego, the grasper, I think. Okay. Is there a difference between a person who has going through physical pain versus somebody who is not? Bye.
So I'm not sure I'm tracking exactly what it is you want to know, but I can say that the physical pain will be the same thing in both cases, whether someone is liberated or someone is still grasping at a self or grasping at an other, or grasping at relative truth in such a way to think that there's such a thing as life and death, good and bad, up and down, pain and pleasure. So I'm saying the illusion is still there. It's an illusion. So go ahead, please.
Kishwang, so I'm asking if I'm reminded of a story from Ramana when you have told this before as well. When he had some cancer in his arm,
Yes,
people wanted operated. He said, "Let the cancer live. It wants to live too."
he did.
But then eventually they convinced him, and they operated on it. And so he didn't take any anesthesia and all that kind of stuff. He said, "Okay, go ahead and cut it if you want to cut it." And that's what they did. And so they asked after the operation, what was it like? And he said, "Yeah, it was like somebody pouring a lot of chili powder into my skin." That was his answer. So I'm just wondering if there is a difference in the way. So the ordinary person suffers because of physical pain, whereas the person who's seen through doesn't suffer because of physical pain?
Yeah, there's still suffering, but there's no sufferer. So there's still suffering. Suffering is dependently arisen. It is an illusion that arises up out of dependent origination, cause and effect, that is completely all over the place. It is impossible to track it down. But there's no individual anymore. That's the part. There's no individual here, and there's no individual or separate other. The Sanskrit, of course, is nisvabhava. There's no self anywhere. There's no solid self in other. There's no solid self in this. So that's the liberation part. Let's keep going.
Ishwang, I still am struggling with what does it even mean to suffer then? Because if suffering is only due to grasping and the grasping is gone, what does suffering mean? I'm still stuck with that.
Now listen to me. The grasping may still be there. If the grasping is gone, then the suffering is gone. But the grasping, because it's dependently arisen, just because we've seen through the ego may still be there too. It may still be operating some way, but consciousness has seen through that. And when consciousness has seen through this, the consciousness no longer is chained or imprisoned by time or space, location or rotation of comings and going, coming and going. It sees that is an illusion. It even sees that the suffering is an illusion. It has to be seen. You want to go further? If you want to paraphrase what you've said, then I'll paraphrase what I'm going to say back.
Kishore, no, I understand. So the suffering is also is seen as an illusion, like everything else.
Yes,
Right.
it's an illusion. It may continue. It may not. You may have cancer and have terrible pain. You may have cancer, and because of the various things in that dynamic, that may back right off, and you may not have a pain. It's very difficult to track down the first cause in any direction, and there's no guarantee. If, as I said earlier, if anyone is whatever they're claiming to teach Buddhism or teach the spiritual path or whatever there's any guarantee or any claim, this is the very nature of illusion. Go ahead, Chisho.
Ishwang, what's the difference between an enlightened person seeing something as an illusion and a person on drugs who also sees it as an illusion?
Well, but the person on drugs thinks they're seeing an illusion. It thinks that they are seeing the illusion, where someone who has realized the illusion sees the illusion. There's no centrality to it. There's no center. There's no fringe. There's no location. It is an illusion all the way through. It's turtles all the way down. Totally. Fundamentally unreal. And of course, look what I'm doing here. I'm using relative terms to describe something that's ineffable. You cannot describe this. So as a Dharma teacher, which is what I refer to myself as, I'm doing the best I can to point at something that it has no support in terms of relative truth. It has some pain, cause and effect. This happens, causes that. This happened, causes that. But that's still an illusion, even though it's has there is the illusion that it's actually occurring. This is why all dharmas are without blame. Anything that arises has no first cause. It can't have it because of the very nature of dependent origination. Most people are swamped by this, and this is why you have most of society and cultures are right and wrong. They take people who are criminals and lock them up, and they take people who have another kind of karma going on, and they elevate them up and put them in charge of everything. Go ahead, Jishin.
Jishin bowing. I asked you at noon the question about pain of Alia.
You asked me at noon?
Today at noon when you came to comment, to answer our questions.
You remember that? Huh.
I do, and I actually would like to explore it more. But right now, I have a question. After listening to your answers, is the person who is realized experiencing that pain of Alia in a different way than people who are not realized?
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, there could be a difference, but you couldn't particularly generalize about that. Someone who is liberated means the consciousness, the body-mind complex is still here. Before awakening, as it says in the Zen tradition, chop wood, carry water. This goes way back centuries. After awakening, chop wood, carry water. The relative truth is still holding forth there. It's the attachment or the demand that is missing. There's no demand for something to be something else because there's great respect for what is showing up as confusion and clarity. There's great respect for that. You respect what is happening. You respect somebody else's confusion rather than trying to correct them or particularly throw them in prison because they've acted in an antisocial way. You might have to protect yourself from them if they're really crazy, but being respectful of other people's confusion is important. And you will have difficulty doing that if you don't respect your own confusion and you keep trying to cover it up so you don't feel a certain way. One of the ways you can stop yourself or interrupt that feeling is to blame somebody else for how you feel. Someone does something or triggers emotions in you and you think they're causing those. Any emotion or any thought you have is not caused by someone else. Don't believe me? Consider it.
Thank you.
There's a question in here? Any questions? Good. Yes, sir.
If I'm believing what's arising and it's that something is causing my suffering, it seems like doing nothing is to function out of that. Is that a misunderstanding?
I would think it would be different with each person. And in your situation, I would say just insofar as you can, just receive it. Don't add any. It's just like you just take something out of the oven, you don't put any condiments on it. You just receive it just like it is. And it may be uncomfortable, it may be difficult. Most people are reacting to anything like that. But as a practitioner, as a meditator for quite a long time, your path would be to just receive it without comment. More?
I wonder if it's helpful to function as if it was an illusion.
Possible. Of course, I don't teach any particular standard for that or particular way of doing that. There are books that teaches 7 points of mind training. That whole book is full of that kind of advice. Also, the way of the Bodhisattva. Some of that is in that material. Can you be more specific? Like pretend you're not mad. Pretty hard to do. No, I'm not mad. No, what you did was just fine. No, it might be better to be genuine. Say if it is another person, say this is what we're going through here is very difficult for me. I'm having a hard time with it. And you could even say, if you have the understanding, you might have the understanding that they're your feelings, that no one can cause your feelings. So anything that shows up in your mind stream can seem like it's triggered by someone else. I'm not saying someone couldn't go up and hit you, and then it's pretty obvious that they're hitting you. So probably doesn't feel very good. So the relative thing, it can be carried so far and eventually just runs out of steam. That's why we have wars so convincing that some people are right and some people are wrong.
I wonder if trying to see the suffering separate from the trigger, or trying to see the dependent origination around that, if that's still stepping away from what's arising.
I wouldn't say so. It's going to show up many different ways. So it could show up that. I don't think there's any strategy you can use other than the only strategy that I talk about at all is whatever shows up, look at it. And if you can, don't comment on it, don't add anything, don't elaborate. But if you do comment or elaborate or add a bunch of things to it, then just observe that. As soon as you can, become an observer of what's happening rather than some kind of a participant that is going in and trying to change, control, modify, blame. It's not that you couldn't do some of that, but it's not going to help. It's just circular. It comes around and bites you in the butt 3 days later or 3 lifetimes later. Is there a final inquiry? Or I noticed Sokuzan's yawning, so I'm starting to think it must be after 8 o'clock. See, you didn't think I'm very aware of stuff. All this meditation, I don't miss much. Well, there's Christine's yawning now. So let's see who else. Go ahead, Jishin. Maybe you can wake it right up.
Jishin Bowing. I have a question about something which Chisho brought to our attention during the class today when we were looking at the opposite of suffering. And Chisho mentioned dukkha as mental anguish and sukha as contentment. Where is sukha? Is contentment? Is sukha as contentment also a cover for suffering? Bowing.
You could probably twist anything any direction. I mean, if you want to talk about it this way or twist it that way. But what I would say about it is that that if there's no demand, you might want this. You might want to have more apple pie or something like that. But there's no demand for it. So I think it's the demand that starts to get just painful to us, that we're so upset with something, we just demand that somebody change something or stop acting a certain way or functioning a certain way. It just gets outrageous, and it's so intensely self-centered, as if we should always be getting our way with everything. So that's the area I would go with that. It's not you want something it's not about so much just the desire, it's the demand to have your way, that this shouldn't be happening and I don't deserve this, and people don't as I talk about CCC, communicate, cooperate, collaborate. You can't do the last two unless you have a lot of communication, and you can't do the first one, the first communication of those 3 C's, unless you listen a lot. Very necessary to really listen to what your partner or your neighbor or your coworker, really listen to what they're saying, inquire about what they're saying, so you make sure that you're really clear on what is happening. You'll notice that quite often that people are just upset but are not clear about what's going on there. They won't really be able to elaborate on what's happening with them, because it is so much clouded over by just the basic distress of not getting their way on a certain thing, or not having what they think they should have. So it can be very difficult to be what's the word, reasonable, to have a conversation about it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Very good. Shall we close? We can close. Okay, thank you. Have any questions before we close? No? Okay. So I wanted to give you a small book on meditation if you I don't know where it's at. Wando? She'll get it for you. We'll get one for you.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places, so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiho san shi shifu, shi son hu sa moko sa, moko ho ja ho ro mi. The 10 directions of 3 times, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna, Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokokoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, family, friends, and visitors. Heal everyone who is unhappy, sick, or suffering, and fill them with light.
Thank you, Sokuzan.
You're welcome, Cynthia.